Hey guys, so starting out, we're going to grab Abyss Freya, probably one of the best planets you can get starting out with a total of 5 production. So next up here, we have a green tech skip, which I think is the strongest tech skip to get and the strongest tech line. But these planets here, even though the influence is a little wonky at 2, ideally you want 3, is probably our best pick. And it also aligns well if we get the other 2 of the same trait objective. Oh, wow. So really strong factions here, but here I have the 2 extra cultural planets. So if by chance that 4 of the same trait shows up, I get that. Plus, it's another 2 high quality planets. A little bit awkwardly positioned again with the influence, but still great planets to get. Not bad. I can't get this planet here because I already have my 3 planets in total. Clan of Sar is probably my best choice here over Extra. It's a bit of a better faction, so let me go ahead and pick up Clan of Sar. So I don't really like aggressive factions like Muat. Fighting doesn't really win you this game, and I'm not really a take that kind of player anyhow. The blank space there, I'd rather hold out on until maybe in the future I get a better red tile. Let me go ahead and play the sneaky space goblins. This should be fun. Aw, Arbrick would have been a fun faction to play. Well, not much of a choice here. At least I get an asteroid field. It's better than blank space. Speaking of blank space, I really can't complain too much though. I probably got some of the best planet setups you can hope for in a game. So looking back here, we have 3 influence, which will align well with leadership. You get 1 token. 5 production, which is insane. And then we have a little bit of a mix of both. Got 2 production and 2 influence. We got an asteroid field, which probably kind of makes Clan of Sar the better choice here, I think, because we're doing Mantis. But I'm going to end up going with Yusarl, because who doesn't love some good space gobos? And my last video was on Clan of Sar. So Red here uses their mulligan to try to get rid of that supernova that's blocking Mechatol Rex, and ends up just pulling out a black hole instead. So if I was green, I would absolutely mulligan that because that looks like their best planet, and you want your best planet within one of your starting systems, so you can take it turn 1 for sure. So my initial reaction is, oh no, there's an asteroid field blocking Mechatol, and I'm Yusaro without anti-grav, but it's okay. Yusaro really can't hold Mechatol very well anyhow. I'd at most get there for the 1 point, and even I don't like doing that as a player because I think jumping ahead really early is the worst thing you could do in this game because it'll paint such a big target on your back for everyone to beat you down. So the blue player decides to mulligan that initial planet placement, and the red player ends up getting another red tile placed next to a red tile, which under normal rules you can't do. But in Mantis, you are allowed to do, like, if you have no other choice. And it's in here we let him move that out to the outer tile. I think a lot of people don't understand the rules of Mantis drafting and competitive drafting and stuff like that. I should probably do a video on it. What do you guys think? So I go back and forth here quite a lot in the literal and figurative sense because I'm thinking to myself, I have the blank space and I want the blank space as far away from me as possible. And then I also have that really good 2 planet of Abyss and Freya, and that'd be a good one to pull out and put right in front of me, like right in my core of my slice. So I go ahead and mulligan here. I'm not even gonna lie, I see that green text skip and I start salivating a little bit. For anyone watching and going, asteroid field right next to Mechatol Rex, go Clan of Sar, it's perfect. Yeah, true. Also, Yusarl, Space Goblins. My precious. So at this point, I know to my left and my right are going to be 2 really great planets, and seeing green put out that blank space provides me a little bit of a buffer, I think, from them. So I want my best planet to be on their side. So I go ahead and put this one more towards the blue player, just because I think if he has a planet there, he's a little more inclined to move my direction, as opposed to doing that 2 jump in order to get to my best planet, which the green player will have to do. And I'd prefer to keep everyone who I'm about to steal from, I mean, be friends with, a little bit away from my best planets. Something I see a lot of players do is they view their area as the slice of the pie, and they kind of take people as threats based on how much they expand out or how much border tension there is. And I have a really awesome advantage here where my core systems right next to my home are totaling at 5 influence, which is a little weak, but I can offset that by not moving too much with my command counters. And then I have 9 production, which is absolutely fantastic. And then I'm going to highlight a couple of places on the spot here. Most of the other good planets are right next to Megatol. They're far away from the home systems of the other players, with the exception of yellow and red, who have two really great planets right next to each other, which is going to put them in conflict almost for sure. So I find this unpack part oddly satisfying for me to just click a couple of buttons and have everything I need laid out in front of me. So to my left are the peace turtles, and there's really nowhere that I can see that I would want to go that would really get me shot by PDS. So that's fine. And they're typically a defensive race, and I'm perfectly fine being a my own slice. To my right, I have this nice little demilitarization zone between me and the sole player. They're a little rough to play against sometimes. Yin is far enough away so that when they blow up, it shouldn't be too close to me. And then we have Hakan and Mintak right next to each other, which is just a classic setup that is a bit messy for the Hakan player. So I like the 4 PDSs here because I'm really looking to protect my core anyhow, and not being able to bombard early game makes it hard to take planets. In order for me to get to Mechatol, I need to have to get anti-grav and go through the asteroid field, which is I'm not planning to go blue early. Or I'd have to go through some of the other players, which it's never good to start fights. So the only downfall with the 4 PDSs is I'm probably gonna have to get construction, and it's not the greatest one to get. With that said, it does avoid me from getting into a trap I see some players do where they only have one space dock, and if your opponent takes that space dock, it potentially eliminates you from the game because you can't produce anything or you can't produce anything fast enough to like push them back. Oh, nice. So we have control 4 of the same planet trait and then spend 5 trade goods as the first objectives, which I already meet one of those, which is the 4 planet traits, assuming I can get my ships there, which I should be able to. I have Dalbutha and Zihan, and then I have Kornik and Raskulan. And you know what? I tried really hard to figure out how to pronounce those. So technology gets taken pretty quickly, and I have a choice between warfare and trade, I think. Looking around, I'd really like to produce with the secondary of warfare and then move out so that I can take the entirety of my core planets in turn one. But from looking at my starting planets, I only have 3 resources. So if I want to follow up technology safely and follow up warfare, I need to like turn one, just get trade going to get some more money. So the turtles pick up leadership. Yin then grabs politics, which is a little interesting. I normally see the last or next to the last player grab that. Hakan picks up warfare, which is an excellent choice on his part because he's wedged between 2 red system tiles and he only has 1 planet to expand to. Warfare will free up that system, and if he plays it right, potentially let him expand out into 2 other tiles in addition to the one right next to him. And finally, the Mintak player grabs construction, which is really the best of the worst choices. So doing some early game expansion here. It's not typically too relevant with your early game expansion, so we're going to go ahead and pass as we do a couple moves. I think outside of myself, the early game expansion, especially right here, definitely ends up in Yen's favor because he gets his best 6, whereas all the other players' best 6 is a little bit farther away from them or perhaps a little hotly contested. For anyone who hasn't played online much, a huge convention is that trade, you end up giving them 1 trade good in exchange for a free refresh of your commodities. Now, you don't really like have to do that. That's just a big social convention or norm. And you end up taking one of your little tokens and just plopping it in their area as a reminder. I go ahead and pop trade. Ideally, you want to go and wait to pop any of your strategy cards until as late as possible in the round. That way, it doesn't give your opponents an advantage. But I don't want to miss the opportunity to follow up tech. I don't want to miss the opportunity to follow up warfare. There's just too much that I need from trade early on to delay it. And you can see everyone just dropping off their tokens in front of me as a reminder. Hakan's the exception because he can go ahead and trade with me now. And generally speaking, people hold up this agreement really well online, at least early on. And the Hakan player picking up one of the best six for him, that is going to be Melon and Zabat. So it's 3 production, 2 culture, which is pretty good. The problem with that is that there's the best 6 for Mintak right beside it, so that may put them in some early clashes. Soul just doing some basic expansion into some planets. Leadership's actually an exception to that rule I mentioned earlier. And it can be used as a stall during the early game for you because it doesn't really benefit other people because they're generally so focused on trying to do that early game expansion. Another one of those social conventions is that the person with politics will typically try to sell the speaker token to the person on their right because otherwise that person would go last. So it really benefits them. And the idea is that the person on the right will still give the politics holder first pick, kind of on a non-binding agreement. And they'll pay them, I think it normally sells for about 2 trade goods. In this case, he offers up a trade agreement, which for extra is basically worth 2 trade goods because you're going to have to spend 1 for someone else to kind of pop that trade agreement for you. Construction also gets played, but I don't follow it up because the only place I could do it would be in my home system, and that would be a horrible idea considering I haven't expanded at all. So I definitely want to take a biz for you first because those are my best planets, and they're also within striking distance, so to speak, from the soul player, so I don't want him to get any bright ideas. I'm going to go ahead and move all of my combat-oriented units, so I'm going to bring some extra fighters with me, I'm going to bring my cruiser with me, just to dissuade him from getting any bright ideas. I'm also going to do the secondary of warfare here. So we're moving a little quick here. Warfare's popped, I still need to follow that. Now we're getting technology that's getting popped, I need to follow that. I'm setting aside the money that I'm paying for both. I intend to do at least 1 faction tax, so there's my 4 for that. And then I'm also going to do 5 more in order to get a carrier and 2 infantry, just to let me do an extra expansion and take the entirety of my inner core round 1. One of the biggest benefits of going Yssaril is that this faction tech allows you to skip an otherwise bad faction tech. This isn't really great. And this one's okay, but it gives you that prerequisite in order to move into hypermetabolism, which is probably one of the best techs in the game, in my opinion. It gets you an extra command counter each round, assuming you can get it out pretty soon. The other thing is I'd really like to get Sarween tools, and I'm really torn on that decision. Sarween tools will get you the PDS upgrade, it gets you into Dreadnought, it gets you the -1 production, so the sooner you get it, the better. Getting it late game really doesn't help you much at all. But I kind of want to rush into green as much as I can this game to get to the final faction tech for Yssaril, which let's say lets me borrow some action cards from the other players. So politics gets played, and I think this is one that you should always secondary. With that said, I hate Dancing with Lady Luck. You could pull an action card that says pay 4 trade goods and just get a free copy of one of your neighbor's tech, which can be amazing if they have War Sun. Or you can get something like Morale Boost, which is +1 to all your rolls. There's a big discrepancy there in how useful that is. One of them directly helps you towards the objectives, and the other one is situational. So let's see what we get. Repeal Law is a decent stall. The Rally card here, this is actually pretty good. It'll get you 2 command tokens for free, sort of. It's pretty situational, but at the very least, you could just throw a command token on the other side of the galaxy just to get a net gain of 1. So it's okay. I do forget to grab my 3rd one as Yssaril. As Yssaril, you can grab, whenever you draw action cards, you get an extra one, and then you just have to put one back, which really helps mitigate that Dancing with Lady Luck thing. because if you have a pile of just useless action cards, you just throw one of the useless ones back. So I actually really like Yusaro. So to go ahead and go through with that trade of speaker token for trade agreement, I personally wouldn't have done this as purple because you're spending a command counter in order to move adjacent to them with that destroyer. So that really costs you 3. And then the trade agreement, when you pop that, you're probably going to have to pay whomever has trade 1 in order to use it. So really the trade agreement is worth 3. So you're kind of spending 3 with that command counter in order to get 3 back. So it's not really a gain. You're not getting anything from it. I guess you could get maybe a stall. Maybe he's looking to stall out. Or maybe he just wants that destroyer there for future trades. Meh. Mintax also just moving a couple of bits of plastic into the system next to their home system. Nothing too crazy. So I don't see a reason to do this in particular order, so I just picked this one first to move some units in, just to grab the planets here. I don't really know why purple's hand is hovering here. That's one thing that makes me paranoid in Tabletop Simulator is whenever you see someone's hand just hovering over like your home system or something. So Hakan and Mintak are neighbors, and Hakan's entire thing is I'm a really good trading partner. I think thematically they actually deal in spice, something like that. Mintak's entire thing is I'm a pirate. I want to pillage. So them being neighbors is really interesting. And what Hakan is offering is I'm going to give you support for the throne, and what I want is promise of protection. Let me see if I can pull that up here. It basically says you can't be stolen from or you can't get pillaged by the Mintak player. And the Mintak player doesn't even want that and looks for a trade good in addition, which they end up going through with that deal. I really think this is a smart move for the Hakan player because getting promise of protection is good, but it also means the Mintak player can freely attack you, and as soon as you attack back, it cancels out that promise of protection. Support for the throne means that Mintak can't attack you or they lose that point, so it's pretty mutual. The other thing is support for the throne will make the Mintak player look like they're doing better than they actually are, and paint a little bit of a target on their back potentially. So Sol activates their best 6 planet next to Mechatol and brings along a carrier through gravity drive along with a couple of destroyers. Now, they can move a ton of infantry with their carriers, that's kind of their thing. In addition, they have the ability to plop down 2 infantry on any planet. So if they get Mechatol really early, it's very dangerous because they can just flood it with infantry and they don't need a single ship in the system. Throw a PDS there, you can't bombard, then they're just swarmed with infantry and you have to bring your infantry all the way back from your space dock in your home to Mechatol to take that planet. So they're really hard to dislodge from Mechatol once they get there, unless a War Sun comes out or something. So Mintak goes ahead and passes here. One thing I forgot to mention about the earlier trade is apparently there was also an action card included, which is pretty crazy. And at this point, they're laughing about that action card, about how good it is. And it makes me think I think there's one that lets you steal all trade goods. So I'm actually feeling very nervous because I have a decent amount of trade goods. So we're going to go ahead and activate this system here, move in with a little buggy in order to bring 3 troops in. I mainly just bring the extra troop to dissuade the turtles from moving in that direction or thinking about it. So the Hakan player tries to sell me in the silence of space at this point, which lets me move through enemy units. I mean, I like it. I wouldn't have any purpose for it, and it may never even come up. He also moves a bunch of units into some of his planets, which is fair. So Sol uses their faction ability to put 2 infantry on a planet they control for a command counter. And taken at face value, that is basically paying 3 in order to get back 2 infantry, which is effectively worth 1. Now, there's a lot of opportunity benefits in that though, because you're limited by space dock production. You're also limited by having to move infantry normally. So I think that's a vastly underestimated ability from Sol. So the table is looking at Sol and realizing, hey, he's looking like he's doing pretty well. And especially because he's within striking distance of Mechatol and no one else can really kick him off easily. Regardless, the yin player goes ahead and passes. I pass as well. I have my core already established pretty well. I'm feeling pretty good. TI4 is interesting because it breaks the fourth wall of board games where it really becomes about player interaction and how diplomatic you can be, and probably most importantly, how much of a threat can you not look like. For instance, right now, no one actually realizes that I think I have the most resource rich area. It just doesn't look that way because I don't look like I'm spread out and I don't look like I'm coming towards other players too much. I really have to hand it to Hakan here. He uses that warfare beautifully in order to get out of his corner of the galaxy and ends up taking a total of three systems with it, which is fantastic. So Hakan ends up buying military support, which is a really good move from Seoul because if they don't have any tokens to lose, they can basically sell that, lose nothing in the process, and gain something. And they also activate the system here, just expanding out their borders a little bit. Oh no. So about this time the table turns into, oh, we're playing D&D now, where everyone's looking at the goblins and going, "We must kill them. They're evil," even though I haven't actually done anything. I do like the fact that I'm next to the peace turtles. They're great. And I don't really think you can call them the peace people, but at least there's a nice, well thought out border there between me and them. This is a really good move by Hakan. He ended up putting down a space dock there, so not only did he expand out to all those planets, but he also gets a chance to build there. And the rest of the table just passes from here, moving us on to the next round. So I spend 5 trade goods, putting me on 1 victory point, tying me with Mintak because he has support for the throne. I'm kind of keeping that for cultural in my back pocket because that seems easier to score in the future for me. And surprisingly, no one else scores anything. So next up is Intimidate Council, which is have one or more ships in 2 systems adjacent to Mechatol. That one's going to be difficult because I could go into this asteroid field, but I would also have to get anti-mass deflectors first. I could grab drive over here, but again, I'd have to go down the blue tech. And I'm already trying to go up the tech tree for green as fast as I can to get the final one for Yusaro, which is a great tech to get. So I get an upgrade, a harness energy, and a sabotage. Pretty good overall. Harness energy works out really well because I want to go to this asteroid field anyhow for the next to Mechatol eventually. I do need to ditch one of these for my ability, and repeal law is kind of the weakest link here. Bye bye. So personally, when I'm playing Hakan, I don't even like taking trade for the most part because you get the secondary for free. In this case, the Hakan player is trying to convince the turtles to let him have trade. What do you guys think? Do you guys like taking trade as Hakan? Oops, forgot to put my tokens away. Ah, let me move one from fleet supply. That should help out a little bit. I feel like goblins should be able to steal tokens. Just thematically, it makes sense to me. So you gain picking up technology, which is always a good choice because so many objectives are tech focused. Politics going to Hakan a little earlier than I would expect. I'd expect someone later to pick it up, but it makes more sense because we're going to have an agenda phase this round. So I'm pretty sure Sol's gonna go for a Mechatol this turn, and I want him to move all his ships out of that system so I can just park one ship there in order to get the 2 adjacent to Mechatol. He wants me to pay him for it, which in his position, how stretched out he is, I don't really think he has too much leverage. He could kind of use a friend at the table, so I pass up on the offer to pay him for it. So I don't like the warfare pick from Mintak because I don't want to be their neighbors and I don't want them coming through the A wormhole there. They could even potentially remove the token there and attack one of my planets. The leadership pick from Seoul is interesting because I personally would have taken Imperial. I don't think there's anyone who can stop him from taking Mechatol and sitting there for at least the end of the turn. So I'm taking a look at diplomacy here. That would prevent an attack on one of my systems. And it looks like there's 2 cruisers that can make it to that A wormhole along with one of the carriers. He doesn't have grab drive to get the other one to me. So it would defend one system, which he could take. I think my kind of counterattack would dissuade that enough to not to happen, I'm Imperial would be a decent choice because getting those action phase secret objectives are really critical. Ultimately, I think construction gives me the ability to build a second space dock. So if he comes in and goes crazy and even takes my home system, I have a backup to produce units in. And it'll help me move towards my secret objective, which is having 4 PDS. So Sol wastes no time taking Mechatol Rex with leadership. And now that I say that out loud, it makes me realize why he took leadership. He wanted to make sure he was first to take Mechatol Rex. And there's really no one that can dislodge him this round, except for, and the table talks a little bit about this, Mintak could go through the black hole in order to take it back, and with using warfare, get enough troops there to actually do it. The problem is if you don't do it this turn or really quickly, Sol can just keep dropping those ground forces and really drop a PDS there to prevent bombardment. And with that combination, you're not removing Sol from Mechatol Rex until you get a War Stunt out, or you get the maybe the bacterial weapon, the latest green tech. So he can hold it for quite some time. Oh, nice. So politics gets played, and I say, oh, nice. It's kind of exciting because you have an off chance of getting something really good. You also have a more than likely chance of getting something not so great. If you ever look at the deck, most of the most of the cards really are not good, and the exceptional ones there's only like one copy of. So taking a look at my action cards, I get Industrial Initiative, Morale Boost, and Solar Flare. Nothing's particularly great here. If by chance I had a ton of industrial planets, this could be really good, but I don't. So I think that's going to be the one that I toss for my ability. So I'm kind of weighing on, do I want 2 PDSs, which will help me satisfy the secret objective that I have, or do I want a space dock and a PDS? Either way, I'm going to go ahead and pop construction. Ultimately, I decide on getting a space dock with a PDS. I want to put that space dock on a biz because that gives me a backup production area, and it also gives me a way of producing that's a little bit closer to Sol, who I think is going to end up being a serious contender. The PDS on a biz also helps protect what is my most valuable system, excluding my home system, of course. So the turtles move up a little closer to Mechatol, which I like. It puts a little bit of pressure on Sol to get off of Mechatol. The turtles are looking surprisingly thin in what they have. I don't want to push into them because I don't want to make an enemy, and I don't think it's really worth it to push in that direction. I already have a really good slice. So Mintak here is taking back a planet that is really close to Sol. In fact, it puts them within striking distance of Sol's home planet. And while it's technically within Mintak's like slice, it's also in that gray area where you start feeling a little pressure from the other player. But Sol is really kind of welcoming to Mintak moving closer to them for some reason. I don't know if there was an agreement struck. I saw a couple whispers go back and forth, but not really sure what the details were. Now we're talking. So Yin's moving next to Mechatol Rex. That's putting more pressure on Sol. Although realistically, I don't think anyone can really dislodge him. They can take the air pretty easily, actually. There's not much there. But I don't think any of them have anywhere enough ground forces to contest Mechatol from Sol. So I think now is just a time for Sol to pick up Imperial and just ride those points out. Ugh. So it ends up taking me way too long to figure this out, but I end up with 3 command counters, and I'm hoping you guys will just let me keep pretending like it didn't take as long as it did as I fast forward through this after I'm editing this video. So it actually takes so long to do that I miss a build from yellow that I'll highlight in editing. I'm going to go ahead and build on a Biz Freya and use my upgrade in order to replace the cruiser with a Dreadnought. This is primarily because I want to discourage Mintak from coming through that wormhole, because as soon as they're adjacent, they can start stealing my trade goods, and ideally, I don't want that. So I want to keep 4 production in reserve so I can research tech later, which only leaves me with 3 to spend here. Seems like a good time to get a bunch of little units out on the board, like your fighters, your infantries. I can only produce five, so I'm gonna end up having to waste one. I don't know if that's a good decision or not. Let me know what you guys think. I'm really just trying to keep Mentak away. I'm not trying to go on the offensive or anything. So instead of getting any infantry, let me just get five fighters, and that'll leave me a total of six in that area, along with the dreadnought and carrier. I think that's a pretty solid fleet at this point in the game. So the turtles play Ghost Ship, and they just drop a destroyer at the wormhole next to their home system. Fair enough. I do start asking them about Quan because they still haven't put anything there. So I'm kind of tempted just to move my carrier in because it's looking like free real estate, but he insists that he's going to move something there this turn. So the Mintac player just activates a system to build, and it takes them a little while to do it. They are the newest player at the table, so we just kind of keep on going. Ooh, so technology gets popped, and this is actually really difficult for me. I go with hypermetabolism pretty quick because I love the green technologies. The unfortunate thing here is that I need to get anti-grav as well because I really don't like that I'm not going to be able to get the two adjacent to Mechatol. But I'm hoping the longer the game goes on, the more people get that objective, the easier it'll become because the less attached people will be to those spaces next to Mechatol. So this whole player does an orbital drop on their home system. And I think this is the I think this player's doing really well using that ability. I don't think I've seen any other Soul player leverage that like he is to just spam out tons of infantry so that it's really hard to take ground from him. With that said, he may need to improve the quality of his infantry. It looks like he's hiring like the guys out of the bar because I don't know what he was doing there. Hakan and myself go ahead and pass here. One thing I like about Yusarl, and I think it really fits me as a player really well, is that Yusarl can just really sit back and hang out, and over the course of the game, collect action cards as kind of aces up their sleeves. So by the time you get to the end of the game, when everyone's going, "Oh, who's the person we really need to like beat down and prevent from winning?" Yusarl can kind of fly under the radar, and then just like drop all these aces from up their sleeves and be like, "Hey, didn't see that coming." With that little tangent aside, the Turtles end up playing frontline deployment to beef up their home system a little more. So Warfare ends up getting played, and I'm not really interested in this. I've already done my build with the upgrade earlier. With that said, confession time. I am really eyeballing Solus Planet right now because there's really no defense there. It's his only space dock that he really has. So if I can take it, there's not much he could do in terms of like counterattacking. He doesn't have a fleet. The dislodging of the four infantry there would be quite difficult, but doable. The biggest problem is I don't have the unit upgrades in order to, and the grav drive for that matter, in order to actually get there in one fell swoop. So Yin just activates the system and moves the destroyer next to Mechatol, getting them the two next to Mechatol at the end of the turn, I assume. So when I play, I have a push to talk to record and a push to talk for Discord. And I swear, the Soul player must have heard what I was saying because they drop exactly one fighter here with fighter two. And that means I would have to move into that blank system and then move into their home system in order to go after them. And it's really a brilliant play on their part. Oh, and as promised, Quan gets gobbled up. So Soul's spending a decent amount of time trying to defend his home system and defending it specifically from me, it looks like. Yet at the same time, Mentak activates a system right next to their home system, and he seems perfectly cool with it. Like nothing's going on. It must go back to some of the whispers that I've been seeing. They must have some sort of deal going on that I'm not aware of. I don't know. So the clones of Yin go ahead and pass. So Soul goes ahead and throws out another fighter screen here. I actually kind of like that there's a fighter there because that prevents Mintak from going through the wormhole and therefore being adjacent to me. So it works for me. And I really didn't want to go and push into his system that much, at least not without getting at least three other techs. So, oh, I guess there is the possibility that I'll eventually need to push into the home system in order to prevent him from winning. Because if I had to guess right now, even though we're really super early in the game, I would say Soul would be definitely in the running for winning this. The turtles go ahead and pop trade, and we pretty much do around the board. As long as you give him one, you get a free refresh. It's pretty standard. All right, lightning round. So Mintak passes. Then we get a move from Soul, which positions them into the black hole for the two adjacent to Mechatol. Then we get a move from the turtles into the asteroid belt, which positions them for also getting the two next to Mechatol. And then Soul and the turtles pass, and we move on to scoring. So for scoring, I'm going to end up getting Corner of the Market, which I'd really prefer to keep this in my pocket because I think it'd be difficult for someone to take this from me per se. I think I have a pretty safe core, but I can't get next to Mechatol Rex. So for the other players scoring, we get three players Soul, Turtles, and Yen, who get two adjacent to Mechatol. Hakan ends up picking the spend 5 trade goods up, and Mintak also gets a secret objective to threaten enemies to have a ship adjacent to the home system of, in this case, Soul. And that makes way more sense as to why Soul was letting them in. I'm assuming they got something out of it. That ends up with myself, Soul, and Mintak being in 2 points right now, and then everyone else closely following with 1. And next up we have Diversified Research. Own 2 techs in each of 2 colors. This is a really big downside of me going all green. It's really awesome for your economy, but it's really bad for the objectives. Let's see what I get. Action cards, War Machine, and War Machine. These are really good for getting out a ton of like fighters or infantry. So overall, a good card. Ancient Barrel Sights I don't really like. It's one of those take that cards. And if anything, I may want to hold on to this just so it's not used against me because I think I have the most, but it's the weakest link. For the agenda phase, we end up with the Prophecy of Ix. Best I can do. And it applies +1 to all your combat rolls for fighters, which would be amazing for a player like Soul, where you're really going to get an awesome fighter scream. You do end up having to discard it if you don't produce more than 2 fighters whenever you produce. So, meh. Basically, the entire table agrees that anyone can have this except for Soul. He's off limits. He's already looking like a serious threat. And I mean, look at that, 17 votes. The Hakan player did pick up politics, so he knows what his next card is, and he just tells Soul what the card is. And in exchange, he asks Soul for his votes, and Soul takes him up on the offer. Something may have been traded in the process, but I didn't really catch what the exact deal was. So next up on the docket, we have Research Team Biotic. This is pretty good, especially if you get it this early in the game, because it's still worth it to skip to hypermetabolism, I think. Especially because it aligns with the having 2 texts in 2 different colors, potentially. I'd actually have a lot of interest in going through the agenda phase cards here and making kind of like a Radis to them, where, like in this case, if this was to show up in the last round, it's not really useful. So add something that's like, oh, this is a green text skip that you can use, or if it's really late in the game, this agenda does something else instead. Or just in general, dwindling down the agenda deck and removing some of the ones that aren't very fun or exciting. I do take a look around to see who would benefit from this in order to skip up to hypermetabolism, and there's a lot of folks who would. The best offer I get is from Hakan, who gives an action card to the turtles to vote for him, and also gives me a promise of 1 trade good. I feel like I could have gotten more from this, but my diplomacy during the agenda phase is something that I, as a player, need to work on. Hakan here going for trade. I would have let someone else get it and just got the free secondary. In his position, offhand, I probably would have went for technology instead to get the two tech of two colors, especially since you can get hypermetabolism because he got the free green skip. And getting that earlier, the better. And then Grav Drive would be a great secondary because Grav Drive's always really nice. Yeah, Mintac picking up technology. Eye on the prize there, Mintac. So some feedback I received was to give some, I guess, critique of what the other players are doing. And initially I kind of shy away from that because I don't really know their action cards. I don't really know their play style. So I don't want to be too judgmental. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Would you like me to comment on what other players are doing more? Above all, I don't want to be offensive to the other players that I'm playing with. Soul picking up leadership here, which feeds into drop shipping more infantry, and that's my assumption. Or he's banking on maybe some of the objectives coming up that you need to spend strategy tokens for or tactics tokens for. I would have personally went for Imperial, especially for the two juicy trade goods there, and I don't think anyone's really going to dislodge him from Mechatol Rex, at least on the ground. In my experience, the best way to win this game is for no one else to perceive you as a threat, because as soon as they see that you're really close to winning, they want to start taking your home system, they want to prevent you from getting objectives. And it really comes down to getting a secret objective that you can play during the action phase that no one expects, being able to pick Imperial and score something mid-round, or it really just comes down to initiative order. So I'm picking politics here because I want to have first choice going into next round, potentially grabbing Imperial to score two and play catch up, or grabbing politics again perhaps in order to grab Imperial again going into the final round, or what I think might be the final round. Generally, you end on the first tier 2 objective reveal. And the Peace Turtles take up Warfare. Wait, hold on. The Peace Turtles take up Warfare. Huh. I mean, I don't really think they're going to fight anyone. They don't have any plastic on the board, really. So it doesn't really concern me. Yin picking up Imperial. And it's really not a bad choice, especially with the two trade goods. It's really only one lacking from trade. That would get him almost certainly the 5 trade goods objective. And then at the end of the round, maybe he can pick up one of the other ones. Ooh, leadership gets popped. I don't really know why it gets popped so early. The Soul player has a decent number of tokens. Also, we're going to go ahead and just fast forward through this and pretend like it doesn't take me an embarrassingly long time to figure out how to pay to get 4 tokens. So, obvious statement, you really want to try to get an objective each round because you can only score one, so playing catch up is really difficult. In order to get adjacent to Mechatol, I don't know how I can do that. I don't have Grav Drive to increase my mobility. I don't have anti-mass to let me go into the asteroid field. I don't have any unit upgrades to add some extra mobility to them. When I look at the one for 2 tech and 2 colors, I would need to somehow get 2 technologies, and I can only get 1 this round. The only thing I can think to do is to play politics and hope that I draw into an action card, which will help me out. So I end up with a Skilled Retreat, which is a really good card, and there's 4 of them in the deck, which I generally find the ones that have 4 aren't too great. Insider information is situational. I guess it's okay. Direct hit, destroy a ship. It's also situational. I find that it's a lot less useful in this version of the game because Dread 2s nullify this card. So I think I'm going to get rid of that one. Maybe I should have gotten rid of the look at the top of the agenda deck. I don't know. So let's take a look at the agenda cards. First up, we have Minister of Peace, and that basically prevents an attack once, which is pretty good to just say, hey, no, you can't activate that system, end your turn, move on. Next up, we have Minister of Policy, and this is fantastic for Yssaril because I'm 99% sure of this. I would end up drawing 3 for the status phase, and then I would end up drawing 2 in addition. And then for the 3, I'd have to put back 1. And then for the 2, I'd have to put back 1. But in total, I would end up drawing 5 action cards. So I really want this Minister of Policy. The problem is I'm really bad at the agenda phase and working it how I want. But I'm going to try to put this Minister of Peace on the very top above the Minister of Policy. And I'm really hoping that they fight over Minister of Peace, which reduces their vote count. And then when Minister of Policy shows up as speaker, maybe I can bribe someone or something like that in order to get that myself. Hakan goes ahead and pops trade, and something I want to say about this Hakan player is that I've never seen a Hakan player swindle action cards like he has. He's constantly going, hey, you want to buy this action card for a couple trade goods? You want to sell me this action card for a couple trade goods? What action cards you need? I got them. Also, a quick side note is that he pays back the debt of one to me from earlier. Peace Turtles end up activating their home system, and due to my gift of foresight, I can see that they're going to produce a carrier and a bunch of troops. So tech ends up getting played, and that puts me in a very awkward position because I'd really like to get Mageon implants as soon as possible because that's an action card. So the earlier I get it, the better. The more action cards I can steal from other people. Overall, good to go. The problem is, in order for me to move in the astral field, I need to get anti-mass deflectors, and that also moves me more towards the objective of 2 tech and 2 colors. Starwing tools would be good because I'm going to build a lot this round, and I need that as a prerequisite for Dread 2s. And so I am really pickled here. I think I'm going to end up getting anti-mass deflectors because that's the most objective focus thing that I can do is to just hope that somehow I can get into that asteroid field and hope that next round I can get grav drive, which will help my movement problems and move me towards the 2 tech and 2 colors. So Yen offers up a support for the throne and a ceasefire in order to take one of the industrial planets from the Peace Turtles, which is a pretty good deal. They end up giving just the ceasefire this round, and then next round doing support for the throne because you can only trade one promissory note per transaction. And that will give them the 4 industrial planets, which means they can use Imperial to get that, or they can use Imperial to get the trade goods. Either way, they're going to get 2 objectives this round. Pretty solid round for them. So the Soul player ends up doing an orbital drop onto Mechatol Rex to farther reinforce that, putting him in just a super solid control of Mechatol Rex. And he's also kind of drowning in strategy tokens as a result. Alright, so this is really, really, really tricksy and thematic to me being the Goblins. If I can convince 2 of these 3 systems to just kind of move the ships off the board, I think what I can do is move 1 ship in, that carrier probably, and then using skilled retreat, I can attack an opponent and then shift around a retreat into one of the other systems. I am desperately trying to convince the other players to move, and I don't know if this is going to work out. For now, however, if I have any chance of this plan working, I need to stall and just hope I can convince the other players to work things out. So I'm going to discard insider information just to pass my turn without actually passing my turn. So Hakan uses production biomes in order to get 4 trade goods for himself, and then you give 2 trade goods to another player. I offer up the deal of providing one of those trade goods back if he chooses me, and he takes me up on the offer. So to follow up on that previous deal, Yen gives Peace Turtles support for the throne, and then the Peace Turtles move a ton of stuff into the asteroid field. Now, earlier on in the game, I'm like, oh yeah, go ahead, take the asteroid field. It's fine, as long as you give it back to me eventually. And the Peace Turtles reassure me that this round they're going to use Warfare in order to go into Mechatol Rex, and I won't have to worry about having to like fight them or anything for the asteroid field. So that gives me one of the 2 spots that I need. So the Mintac player activates the wormhole and kind of tells me that, oh no, there's nothing to worry about here. I'm just kind of coming through the wormhole in order to have more neighbors and to be friends. It's fine. But then brings a really large fleet for that objective. You know, like if you're really just looking to be beside someone, you could just drop a simple destroyer or something there. In general, you don't even want to be neighbors with Mintac because it means they can steal from you. And I suspect that he's coming through in order to steal neighboring trade goods and also to potentially start attacking some of my systems. With that said, I really have mixed feelings about it because all those things I just said, definitely bad for me. But it does provide me an opportunity to attack skilled retreat and potentially move me behind and take the second planet that I need in order to get the two adjacent to Mechatol. So Yin was kindly asked to get out of the way before he becomes a bug on Hakan Fleet's windshield. So he moves the destroyer on out, buffering his home system a little bit with his ship, which is nice. You also have an orbital drop from the Federation of Sol onto some planets, and I'm over here going, hey, can you move the ships out of that system so I can take that? And he's really confused as to how I'm going to get there. So there's a lot of back and forth there. So I'm in really heavy negotiations with the blue player and green player in order to get the two adjacent to Mechatol. I just need to stall out. They're both saying that they're inclined to do it. They just need more time. So let me get rid of Solar Flare. That's probably not going to be useful this game. It just prevents some PDSs from attacking you. And there's not even too many PDSs on the board. So the Hakan player moving forward with his fleet a little bit here. Now, I don't see enough infantry or bombardment in order to take Mechatol Rex, which I think is the eventual goal. I'm just speculating though. So I'm really crippled here by the amount of speed my ships have. So I follow up the secondary of warfare with some zoomies so I can move around the galaxy a little bit quicker and hopefully help me get that objective from Mechatol Rex. I also played War Machine here, so I want to take advantage of that. I don't really have a ton of resources, but let me spend what I have in order to get some fighters and infantry while I can. I do end up skipping the Mentak player's turn here. He ends up just activating Lodor, which is the alpha wormhole. I'll highlight that on the screen. Ooh, so Imperial ends up getting popped, and I definitely want to follow up that one. And let's see what I get here. Own two faction technologies. That aligns really well with my goals because I want to get my second faction technology as soon as possible so I can start borrowing other players' action cards. Sooner the better. So he ends up just ceding Mechatol Rex to the Peace Turtles in exchange for a trade agreement. The Peace Turtles actually do have enough infantry to potentially win that fight. Personally, if I was Sol, I would have gotten a PDS onto Mechatol sooner and then, I guess literally, bunkered down with my orbital drops in order to get the Imperial points. And really, that is a unique characteristic to Sol, and Sol may be one of the few factions that I would actually try to take Mechatol early and hold on to it with. Also worth highlighting, the Mentak player in the background is still building in Lodor, that alpha wormhole area. We're giving him a little leeway because he's the newest player at the table, and just to keep things moving along. So I continue to convince the Sol player to kind of free up the space over that system that I need. I do end up creating a bad guide list, just hoping that he knows what the second faction ability for Yssaril is, and it kind of persuades him a little more. So I'm continuing to look for stalls, and activating the Grav Rift here will get me a stall, basically. So I can wait for other players to move out, I'm hoping. It'll also let me play Rally, which gives me 2 additional fleet. So I don't really lose command counters in doing this. And then I can also play Harness Energy, which replenishes my commodities. Ooh. So something I didn't expect is that Hakan has activated one of Yin systems. I'm assuming this was part of some sort of deal in order to get the 2 adjacent to Mechatol. Turtles ends up taking Mechatol Rex, and then he leaves behind 1 carrier, which I really don't want him to do because I want that asteroid belt to be open to me, and then skilled retreat into green system because I can't really make it to his system. He seems to be okay with me destroying that carrier, so it all ends up, well, I suppose. Mintak with the first pass for the round. So the Yin player uses transit diodes, and he makes the honest mistake of thinking that that's an action to do. He mainly just uses that to reinforce the planets, and he doesn't quite catch that it's not an action until a little bit later, but I'm going to go ahead and mark him as passed. Exciting! We have our first combat, all the way into round 3, which is surprising. So Sol's moving in to take this system. I'm imagining for like a adjacent to home system objective or something like that. Mintak seems okay with it because just from the table talk, and he's also declaring a retreat. Moving through the gravity rift with these two ships, there isn't any losses on Soul's part, so all's well there. The space combat itself, we end up with Mintak getting one hit, which gets taken by a fighter, obviously. And then the Soul player ends up with two hits, so more than enough to finish it out there. So moving on to the ground combat, it's two infantry versus one, which anytime you have infantry on infantry combat, it's really a toss-up because the requirements to hit are so high. We end up with an initial loss by Soul. So then it becomes one-on-one infantry combat, which becomes even more dicey. But lucky for Soul, he ends up landing that last hit and takes the planet. Excellent. So Soul left that spot open that I need. So let me activate this system. And then a rule question that I'm pretty sure on is that for skilled retreat, they're both start of combat for this and the Mentak player's ability to fire at the start of combat. So I think I get the opportunity to skilled retreat first. Either way, in this case, the Mentak player just says, I'm not gonna shoot you, so you're good. And this gets me one of the two systems adjacent to Mechatol Rex. Can't believe I might get this objective. Next up is Hakan, who activates one of their systems and just builds. Pretty straightforward. During the Turtles' turn, they also get past two action cards and two trade goods from Hakan. I'm going to go ahead and assume that that is in no way going to benefit the Goblins, but I'm not exactly sure what the deal is because they do it through whispers. Soul activating one of their systems and moving the party bus in. I call it the party bus, and I think a lot of people do because it has a whopping 12 capacity, which just means it can basically carry anything and everything. And the fact that it generates one infantry each round is pretty nice too. I do buy military support from them in order to get a couple more reinforcements at home. I'm worried about Mintak coming in and attacking my home planet and then coming through this wormhole and taking like adjacent. So I sincerely feel bad here because I end up activating the system, moving in with the 3 cruisers, and I need it for adjacency to Mechatol, and he's cool with me doing this. The problem is I ideally want him to be able to retreat, but I end up getting 2 hits and he gets 0. Hakan at first passes, but then decides to play War Effort in order to place a cruiser down. Unlike most people's promissory notes for their faction, Souls really doesn't have a downfall to it, so he's really hustling and trying to sell that as much as he can. I'm offering a trade good for it, but he doesn't take me up on it. I'm not entirely sure why, but he thinks I'm a little bit too much of a threat, and it ends up going to the Peace Turtles. After which, Soul, myself, and Hakan all pass, so that concludes round 3. Taking a look at scoring, I have no idea how I pulled this off, but I did manage to get the 2 adjacent to Mechatol Rex. As for the other players, Yin gets 4 of the same trait through Imperial, and also gets the spinning of 5 trade goods. Turtles also picks up spinning 5 trade goods. Hakan gets the 2 adjacent systems to Mechatol Rex, and Mintak is surprisingly the only person to get 2 texts in 2 different colors. And actually that makes sense because that's a good one to keep in your back pocket because it's hard for someone to stop you from getting that without taking your home system. The Turtles end up scoring a secret objective to occupy the seat of the Empire, basically control Mechatol Rex. And Yin also gets a secret objective, but that one's much more costly for him. He has to discard 5 action cards, and he ends up discarding some pretty good ones. So next up for our objectives is erect a monument, and I really don't want to see this because I kind of want to spend those resources on protecting myself from Mintak. I don't know what I'd rather see, but not one that I particularly want to see. So I end up picking up Warfare Rider, Lost Star Chart, and Salvage. And something I haven't really thought about until now is that I always kind of de facto try to wash my commodities into trade goods as soon as possible, which I don't really know if you really have to do that. If you're buying things off of another player, it's going to convert into a trade good anyhow. So in the future, it may be wise for me to hold off on doing that sometimes and just use the commodities to trade instead. Anyhow, taking a look at the action cards that I got, I get a Warfare Rider, which I'm horrible at predicting how agendas go, honestly. Lost Star Charts is sometimes an amazing card, but in this case, I don't really see anywhere that I would want to go from A to B. And Salvage, as I spoke earlier, people just in Tabletop Simulator immediately get rid of their commodities. So I'm going to end up getting rid of Salvage. So first up on the docket, we have Minister of Peace, which doesn't surprise me at all because I had politics. So I'm hoping everyone spends their votes here, and then I can just, as speaker, last rounds, grab the next agenda. I hope. Soul plays a politics rider on the Peace Turtles, and The only thing I can think that he's trying to do here is prevent the Peace Turtles from getting this. I suppose the Peace Turtles do have the most votes, but you're not going to just hand someone the speaker token and 3 action cards. Ugh, so I'm so bad at working these agenda phases. Turtles end up passing, which makes sense. They have the most votes, and they might as well just save it for the next round because they're not really going to win this due to the politics rider. Yin player is also passing for similar reasons. He's not going to win this, so you might as well save your votes. Hakan throws 9 votes his way, which I could beat with the tiebreaker, but then Mintak jumps on board to help him kind of throw it over the edge, so I can't win it. And it makes sense. Mintak, I think, is at this point gunning for me a little bit, so it doesn't want me to get Minister of Peace. So next up is Minister of Policy, and I would absolutely love to have this card, especially as Yusarl, because you effectively get 5 action cards and you have to put back 2. Unfortunately for me, the entire table just hard nopes to Yusarl getting this, which is fair. As I look around the table, it's kind of between the Peace Turtles, Soul, and Yin, and of those, the Peace Turtles is looking the least threatening, so I'm thinking I might as well play my Warfare Rider on them. Unlike some of the other riders, I think just getting 1 Dreadnought isn't that big of a deal, and they also have the most votes at the table. Yin and Soul are also looking way more threatening, so I would think the table would kind of want to lean Peace Turtles, but this actually ends up going to Soul, and I don't actually know how that happened. I guess in the end, it's really only going to be a couple of action cards at this point. It's because it's so late in the game, but why? Why go to Soul? I really need to start scoring my points, specifically some of my secret objectives, which is going to make me look a lot more threatening during this round and after this round. I'm not really sure why Mintak would do this, but so often in games what I see is when someone starts pulling ahead, the home system ends up getting taken by some player, oftentimes not even the player that's contending to be like the winner. So it looks like Mintak could take their fleet from that A wormhole and attack my home system, taking one of them. And then their other fleet could come in and take the system adjacent to my home system pretty easily. I don't think they would hold it. The problem is that that would put me down some planets this round, and I really need that to erect a monument. So I'd really like to go before Mintak, just to kind of have that strike first mentality where I take the wormhole from them so their second fleet can't come through. Fortunately, as I looked at the objectives, I really want to get 2 tech in 2 colors, and I also want to get my secret objective, which is 2 faction techs. So I think I have to take technology here. So everyone picks their strategy cards really fast here, so bear with me. Imperial goes to Turtles. He can score the 2 in 2 colors for technology. He can also probably get 2 adjacent to Mechatol because no one else will care. Trade goes to Yin, which is an interesting decision. I'm not really sure why. Maybe to erect a monument. Diplomacy goes to a con. Again, I'm not really sure what they're looking to defend, but it may just be that they need resources to erect a monument. Leadership goes to Mintak. I don't really want to see them go before me, but realistically, I got technology. The only thing that goes after that is Imperial, so I really only have myself to blame here. Politics ends up going to Soul, and that is by far the best strategy card if you think the round after the current one is going to be the last. And in my experience, games of TI4 tend to end on the first, sometimes the second stage 2 objective. And this sets him up to either grab Imperial and score that way, or to end up getting another strategy card like Leadership, which puts him first in the initiative order and lets him score first. And so many games I play of TI4 come down to who scores first. Mintak does a really early pop of Leadership here, which makes sense because he doesn't have anything in his strategy pool in order to do secondaries. He was almost kind of forced to take Leadership. So I don't really have a lot to spend here between wanting to erect a monument to spend 8 resources and wanting to do the primary of technology, which costs 6, and wanting to build up some of my fleet. That really doesn't leave a lot of planets left. So I only end up getting 2 command tokens here. And I have a ton in fleet supply, just because I have a lot of cruisers that I potentially want to move into a battle with. And that is the downfall of getting cruisers. They're zoomy, but they require more fleet supply. While I was doing the secondary of leadership, the Hakan player ended up moving his fleet into a blank system. I imagine just to position himself to take some planets from Yin if he needs it, since Yin's looking pretty vulnerable. The other thing is there's a lot of whispers between blue and purple right now, which makes sense because Yin is all up in their slice. The Soul player ends up just doing an orbital drop on some of his home regions, or like not his home regions, but like the home slice area here. And I imagine that's a bit of a stall. I've never seen a Soul player use the orbital drop so much, which works out well. I mean, no one has the extra bacteria weapon, I think it's called, in order to completely wipe out a system. So Yin goes ahead and pops trade, and trade's one of those strategy cards that gets less valuable as the game goes on because fewer and fewer people are willing to give you that additional trade good in order to get the free commodities that is optional. Like in this instance, I end up just paying a token for it because I have so many tokens available to me. And at the end of the round, I plan to reshuffle them anyhow once I get a little bit of a stronger fleet than mostly cruisers. I explained to the Mentac player my concerns of him being able to move one fleet into my home system and then another one into the adjacent home system. And I'm like, look, I really don't want that to occur. And in order for me to prevent it, I'd have to attack that A wormhole. So rather than us fighting, would you mind giving me your ceasefire so I have some guarantee that that's not going to occur? In exchange, he's looking to kind of get a trade good out of it, which is fair. He ends up, it actually works out pretty well for me because he ends up washing my commodities. So, and wash is a common phrase that's used in Tabletop Simulator of just turning your commodities into trade goods. I wonder if it comes from a money laundering term. Anyhow, he also lets me know that he is aiming to take that system next to Mechatol Rex, which means I will lose my carrier. I don't really think it's worth trying to move it out at this point. I don't really need it for much. I really want to beef up the amount of plastic I have on the board so I'm not as threatened by Mintac or any of the other players taking my home system, or Bizfria, which I really need. So I'm going to go ahead and activate my home system and build there, along with using War Machine, which is such a good card for getting out infantry and fighters. I do end up missing the Peace Turtles turn here a little bit. They end up playing Rise the Messiah, which is a fantastic card. You end up putting one ground force on each planet, and I think at least in the base game, infantry and controlling a planet is really underestimated. That'll probably change with Prophecy of Kings introducing mechs. I think they probably did that as a little bit of a way of helping out ground combat and to make it more interesting. And I'm excited to play it and subscribe to the channel. I'm sure I'll get a playthrough up eventually. These playthroughs for TI4 are just so time consuming to edit down. I end up with my final build being 4 fighters, 1 dreadnought, and 2 infantry. And then I just pull back my carrier because I'm not seeing the turtles looking at my planets too much. Like, they seem pretty docile at this moment. Mintac moving into a system that has my carrier in it. Yeah, I don't really think it was worth moving this guy out. He's really just looking for the 2 adjacent to Mechatol Rex, and he told me that, which is fair. I mean, at this point, most other players have it, so it's a good one for him to go for. I almost don't even bother announcing retreat just so I don't lock down those cruisers. I'm still really paranoid of maybe Soul coming in and attacking me, perhaps. But I go ahead and sure, I'll announce retreat, thinking that it's really improbable for it to occur. But nonetheless, somehow that carrier actually survives. Hakan plays Impersonate, which is a really fantastic card. It lets you draw a secret objective for the cost of 3 influence. Soul is really considering going into Mechatol Rex here, and I think that ship has just sailed for him. He should have really bunkered down while he had the chance. He could maybe go in there with the party bus and win that air fight and then drop a bunch of troops. But at this point, it would be a bit too much of a bloodbath. he ends up just moving into the A wormhole next to me, which isn't a bad move. It gives him a potential to scoop up some of my planets and to kind of cripple me a little bit, as I am looking like a contender to beat him. So again, just moving a couple of ships out. And for some reason at this point in time, I decide to focus on every single thing on the board to just mess with you guys, apparently. Uh, yeah, sorry. You guys should like and subscribe. Anyhow, I'm doing my best. Please. I'm in a difficult situation because I want to use technology in order to get my faction tech, which gets me a secret because I'll have my 2 faction tech at that point. And then I want to get Grav Drive because that'll get me Diversify Research, which is 2 tech and 2 colors. The thing I'm worried about is if that stage 2 objective is to have 3 unit upgrades. I'm very far from being able to get that. Plus, I have no unit upgrades at all right now, which is generally a bad thing because it really reduces your mobility around the board. Imperial ends up getting played, and don't get me wrong, secret objectives are really amazing because they're an opportunity to get more points than you otherwise would through the stage 1 or stage 2 objectives, but you're really fishing for those action phase cards. And at this point in time, a lot of the deck has been gone through, and depending on how much it's been gone through, your chances of getting those action phase cards go down because I think a lot of players are aware that those action phase cards are gold. The Peace Turtles are really doing a fantastic job here. They don't have a lot of plastic on the board except for Mechatol. But with this action, they end up picking up Diversify Research, which is 2 tech and 2 colors. That puts them at 5. And then they control Mechatol Rex, putting them at 6. And there's really not a lot of meta kind of, oh no, stop the Peace Turtles talk going on right now. So they're doing really well. Let's see what secret objective I get. Unveil Flagship. Okay. This is a really good one, especially because it's an action phase one, so you can kind of sneak in that win when no one is seeing it and can stop you. The downfall here is that I don't actually have my flagship and I've locked my home system, which is really unfortunate. And combine that with the fact that Yusaro offhand probably has one of the worst flagships. Bentak just activates the black hole in order to get the second adjacent to Mechatol that he needs. And also worth noting that at this point, the Peace Turtles ask if they can go ahead and change from the objective they scored to getting a Rectum Monument to spend 8 resources, and the table kind of agrees that that's fine. I mean, it's a casual game, so. Hakan ends up playing Diplomacy and locks down a system. I think they just played this in order to get their planets back. I would like to secondary this to do the same, because Abyss Frio would give me 5, but I would be short 2 to get a Rectum Monument. Maybe it was a mistake to build that fleet. I end up getting Spy played against me, which Yusara was the worst person to play a Spy against. You basically get a random action card from them, and I go ahead and sabotage this because I might as well. There's 1 in 3 chance they get the sabotage anyhow, and you really don't want to reward bad behavior like this. Soul ends up using politics instead, which is works for me. I want to use my faction technology in order to nab some action cards from other players, and the more action cards in their hand, the better chance I have of getting something useful. Let's see what we get here. Flank speed. This is really good because I'm so deprived of movement anyhow. Just getting that extra +1 could be game winning. Lost Star Charts is definitely the weakest link out of the bunch. I don't see me needing to go from an A to a B wormhole at all. The morale boost is nice, and the sabotage just really replaces the sabotage I just used. But sabotages are always welcome. Yin plays Uprising on, I think that's Vavoot 2. So it'll get him 2 trade goods, but it'll unfortunately exhaust that planet for the soul player. And I think it's about that time in the game where I should support swap with someone before I have to support swap with someone that is looking like a target for me. Now, Soul is in contention for winning this, and I may have to go after his home world, but looking at the infantry on his home world, that's going to be really difficult for me to take anyhow. I do kind of do a sleazy move and then turn around right after doing a support swap and steal one of his action cards. I'm not the nicest goblins, I guess. So taking a look at his hand here, I'm not really seeing anything that stands out. It really is a bunch of junk. which is generally how the action cards go for me if I'm not playing as the goblins, where I can get rid of some of the junk. I guess some of it's pretty good. I mean, bribery could end up winning you something. Um, I think. Oh yeah, I think flank speed is my winner here. That is the one that is going to help me. I've been deprived of speed the entire game. So the con player in chat threatens Mechatol, and the turtles take that threat seriously and just nope right on out of Mechatol. I really like what he does here. He leaves behind some infantry, and I really want everyone's opinion on this. Have you guys noticed how underestimated leaving infantry on a planet is? Now, I know there's action cards to account for that, that will just like plague, that will just annihilate infantry on a planet. And there's also the bio weapon, so there's ways around it. But generally speaking, it's actually really difficult to take a planet when it comes to ground combat. The Mentak player also goes ahead and passes here. The con player wastes no time moving into Mechatol Rex. Something I should add to maybe my previous comment is that maybe part of the reason why infantry is underestimated is that the current meta is to have dreadnoughts, a lot of dreadnoughts, because of bombardment. And maybe that's a bit of the influencer there. Although you throw down a PDS and you can really hold on to something if you really want it. Taking a look at the incoming fleet here, we have 2 dreadnoughts, so 2 bombardments, and then 2 infantry. On the ground, we have 3 infantry. I don't think those are too bad of odds with the 2 bombardments, but it's not great. Let's see. And we get 0 bombardment hits. He decides not to land, which yeah, that makes sense because you don't want to do 2 infantry on 3 infantry. That's not going to go well for you. So Saul is really hesitant about this move. I actually clipped out a ton of him just circling around with the command token, figuring out what it is that he wants to do. If I had to speculate, I would say that doing this leaves behind very few troops. So he's concerned about holding on to those planets because they are definitely in Mintak's slice. Taking a look at the combat here, 2 and 1 is not very good odds. It looks like Mintak got 1 hit, which brings it to 1-on-1. Got 1 hit from green. And a hit from red, so Mintak retains control of the planet. I feel like this game is a bit of a lesson on how good infantry and just stacking them up on a planet is. Yin doing a simple build in their home system. If you'd like to help me build out the channel, please make sure you subscribe. That'll let you know of future videos that I create. And also leave a like on the video here. Both of those things really help provide positive feedback to me in terms of what should I take time to go through the editing processing for. Trust me, I play plenty of board games. It's just a matter of spending the time to edit them and then release them. I'm going to go ahead and pass here. I can't really think of anything else that I could do that would be productive, so I don't want to just waste tokens. Peace Turtles just building their home system. Pretty straightforward move. The Hakan player does their faction ability in order to get 4 trade goods and then give 2 to one other player. They choose Mintak. I am assuming just because Mintak is on 3 points, so they're kind of the least threatening player. Soul has a go at Mechatol Rex. The only way he can get there is by using In the Silence of Space, which allows him to move through opponents' units. The problem with this tactic is that we're playing with the Peace Turtles, and Hakan is being attacked here. So Hakan easily just pays 4 trade goods over the Peace Turtles in order to instinct train that, which stops the action card. Basically a sabotage, except better because it can stop any action card, including a sabotage. Yin plays transit diodes in order to move a couple of units around, but otherwise passes. Followed shortly by the Peace Turtles, who also will be passing. Hakan plays fighter conscription to get him 1 fighter at each location he owns that has capacity for holding a fighter. After that, the Soul player passes, and then the Hakan player passes. Taking a look at the scored objectives for this round, we have Mintak with the 2 adjacent to Mechatol. Hakan, to really no surprise, gets a Recta Monument. They have plenty of trade goods to get that stuff. Soul also gets erected monument, which is surprising, actually. Diversified research goes to turtles and yen. For secret objectives, Soul picks up mine rare metals, which is have 4 hazardous planets, and Yin gets control of the region, which is have a ship in 6 different systems. And that one is kind of surprising to me. I didn't think he had his ship spread out that much, but good job. So I pick up diversified research. I prefer to keep this one in my back pocket, but I just don't have the resources to get the erecta monument. And I also pick up the have to faction technologies secret objective. I go ahead and play this because I think there might be a chance, depending on what this stage 2 is, that I can end it next round using my secret objective of unveil flagship and establish a perimeter. And if I can score that stage 2 objective, I think I would have it. The stage 2 objective coming out is galvanize the people. Spend 6 tokens from your strategy or tactics pool. And I think I can actually get that one. I have a lot of command tokens right now. Combine that with the 4 PDS and unveil flagship. And I think I can end it this round. That would bring me from 6 to 10. Take a look at my action cards for this round. Veto's a good card in case an agenda comes up that I just really don't like. Forward supply base is good. I definitely need the resources in order to get maybe a Rectum Monument as a backup plan or my flagship, something like that. But it's really dependent upon someone landing on my planet, which I don't actually think is going to occur. And then finally, we have Ghost Squadron, which moves troops from one planet to the other that's in the same system. That's way too situational. So, yeah, bye. For the agenda phase, we get Minister of Exploration. That'll give you 1 trade good whenever you gain control of a planet. With only 1 or 2 rounds left, this isn't going to help you a lot. We get an honest effort from Soul. He puts 2 votes against himself. But ultimately, Hakan takes this with 4 votes and then actually leaves them with 3 laws in their play area. Technically 4 if you want to include the one attached to their planet. Hakan really knows how to hustle this agenda phase. Next up on the agenda phase, we have Judicial Abolishment. This would just get rid of 1 card in play. And I think out of any of us, this would hurt the Hakan player the most. I'm not really sure what they have that would be worth protecting so much, but they do end up paying 4 to the turtles just to get rid of this law, and let's look at the next one. So next up, we have Crown of Infidia. I tried. This basically gives someone a victory point unless they lose their home system, and taking a look around the table, the people with the most votes are also the people contending to be in winning distance with me. And I don't think I'm going to get it out of them. I think it would probably go to Turtles. Or if anything, we would all just vote on one of the losing players to get it. But either way, just to be safe, I'm going to go ahead and veto it. Next up, we have Conventions of War. Players cannot use bombardment against cultural planets. This works out great for me. I have a lot of cultural planets, and I'm not really looking at attacking anyone this round. It's at least not their planets. I kind of want to blow up one of their ships for my Unveil flagship, but that's another story. The against on this is if you vote against, you have to discard your action cards. So that's a bit problematic. So Mentak ends up playing an Imperial Rider on 4. This is kind of crazy. Normally Imperial Riders are hard nope to whatever is occurring on where it goes, but Mentak's on 4 for VP, so it's probably okay. And then Hakan ends up playing a Leadership Rider, which gives him a couple strategy tokens, and then a Technology Rider, which gives him a technology. And again, he's not winning the game per se, so it's not super important. And we really just need 1 vote on against in order to prevent all of those riders going through. The problem is when you vote against, you have to discard your action cards, and no one wants to do that. Especially me as your sorrow. I got great action cards. So we go right around the table, goes to speaker. The speaker breaks ties for four, speaker in this case being Mintak, and they get all their riders. Mintak picking up leadership going into round five. And that's pretty smart of them because that should get them the stage two objective for the strategy and tactics tokens. Soul grabs Imperial, and he really only needs 4 points to win. I say 4 points like it's nothing, but with Imperial, he could get the stage two objective, which is 2 points in and of itself, and then you get one from Mechatol Rex, and then you get your last point from end of round scoring, or maybe there's an action phase objective, secret objective that is, or a status phase secret objective. Tons of ways for him to get points. The only downfall is that he's going to be last to score. Now, the problem with my two secret objectives is that one of them I need to put out another PDS for, so construction needs to be taken. The other one I need to create a flagship and also use that flagship in the same round. So I kind of both need warfare and construction. I think I'm going to go ahead and gamble that construction's the least likely to be taken by another person. Plus, it has a couple trade goods on it, which is a nice bonus. As a backup plan, I could also use the secondary of Imperial and really hope that I luck into another secret objective. But I don't think I'm going to get another action phase secret objective. I think there's only 4 of them in the deck. And getting another status phase one wouldn't really help me. The Turtles picks up Politics, which, to go back to my earlier comment, Politics is the best card to get if you think it's going to end the game on the next round. So this really positions Turtles in a really good spot if we end up having another round. Oh, yippee! So Yin's taking Warfare, which means I'll be able to get the secondary of that to produce my flagship, and then I'm hoping I can just start a fight somewhere that's a pushover. It looks like Soul has 2 spots. Ah, but I have support swap with him. That's not going to work. Ugh. I guess I could get somewhere with maybe a flank speed or coerce someone into attacking me. Khan ends up taking technology, which isn't a bad pick because some of our next stage 2 objectives could be own unit upgrades, 3 of them specifically, or you could have the technology which is really close for, which is have 2 tech in each of 2 colors, which he really only needs 3 tech for. You can see the Turtles are literally dangling support for the throne in front of Mintak. And they really want leadership to get popped because without leadership, they're going to have no strategy tokens to do the secondaries of just any of the strategy cards, which is really unfortunate. Surprisingly, Mintak doesn't take that deal. I would take that deal. I mean, he wants to pop leadership anyhow. He's down to 1 strategy token. So it's basically a free victory point, unless he really needs to go after the Turtles for one of his objectives. And I don't see that happening. Now, granted, they're not adjacent to each other, so there would be a bit of a trust issue there. Mintak plays Unstable Planet just to clear the way to take one of the planets from Sol that he already occupies the space area of, so he just doesn't have the ground troops to really do too much of a tussle there, especially if he wants to take both planets. At this point, the Yin player is also trying to convince me to go after the Sol's home system because Sol's going to win this round. And I do agree with him that it is really, really likely that Sol is going to end up winning at the end of the round. The problem is that if I go after him, I'll lose my support for the throne, which really means I'm not going to win this round. And the resource cost of me getting there would be just insane. Like, let's say I follow up technology with something that lets me get some carriers there, like Carrier 2, and I can somehow get enough ground forces there to even contend against the planet that has, I think, about 5 ground forces. I'd have to move into the space that has the fighter screen to clear that out, and then I'd have to move it to the home system itself, or broker some kind of deal with a Khan who might still have the in the silence of space. Peace Turtles ends up playing Politics, so it's time for me to draw some action cards. Let's see what I have here. Focus Research. I actually really love this card, but I'd really love to get that card way earlier. Shield's holding is really useful. Trade Rider at this point, I don't think there's going to be another round. I think either myself is going to win it, or if it doesn't work out for me, it's going to go to Soul. I would put the Turtles in the running too, but since they grabbed Politics, it makes me think that they just don't have the ability to finish it this round, and they're expecting it to go another round. Part of my deal with Mintac getting their ceasefire was that I would return it at the end of the round. I really just needed the one round reassurance. So I'm following through on that. I didn't intentionally keep it longer than I was supposed to. I just forgot to give it back during the agenda phase. I am happy with the number of combat related cards that I have trying to go after Unveil Flagship and win that combat. The morale boost will help me, the shield holdings is going to help me. So I'm feeling good about that. A problem that I have is that I need to activate a system and attack it and then play flank speed. Unfortunately, if that flank speed gets sabotaged or it gets instinct training, which is the turtle's ability to just say nope to an action card, I really can't get that command counter back and then attack again. And there's only really one spot that I can see that is vulnerable enough for me to attack with my flagship. I can't really spend any of my command counters, so I kind of need a stall. And the best stall that I can think of is the researching of tech. I end up selling my political secret to Hakan. It's only one trade good, which is all that I need for focus research, but it's a horrible deal. I just don't think there's going to be another agenda phase. This will allow me to research a unit upgrade, which will give me some more of that mobility and provide some support to my flagship in order to win a combat. So I end up grabbing Carrier 2. Dread 2 may have been a little more useful, but I think bringing fighter screens with your combat is just super important. Dian's going ahead and taking their turn, just activating a system, moving a little closer to Mechatol. Nothing really too concerning here, I don't think. Something that I am something that I'm thinking of is that it is very possible that Yen moves that fleet out of the system, which takes it out of striking range, which then leaves the turtles for me to attack, which is way higher chance of instinct training getting played that way. But I really can't do anything about it because I have to wait for warfare to be played before I build my flagship and then attack with it. So I'm really just crossing my fingers and hoping. Khan plays tech, and my thinking is that I'd really like to get infantry 2 just because I've been seeing how much ground combat has been so dicey, and it is possible that I have to go out and attack Soul's home system to prevent them from winning if it doesn't work out for me. So this is kind of a contingency plan. In hindsight, I think this was probably not the best move. I don't think it really I don't think Infantry 2 would have helped me more than Dreadnought 2. Dreadnought 2 would have gotten me extra move, and it would have gotten me extra bombardment, and just overall been better. And it also would have worked towards, if there's another round by some miracle, I have 2 out of the 3 unit upgrades that I need in case that objective comes out for needing 3 unit upgrades. I'm kind of taking a look at my planets here going, okay, how much do I have to spend for my flagship? And then how much am I going to have remaining in order to get some command counters? And it's looking pretty slim. I need 6 of them in my strategy and tactics in order to fulfill the public objective for stage 2. That leaves me with 1 left. And I think I can end up getting 1 more from leadership follower. So I don't think I can afford to do the Imperial Secondary here. I'd really love to, just to see if I luck into something that's easier to get than what I have, but I don't think I can afford it. Mintac ends up activating their home system to do a build, which is interesting. I would have waited for Warfare, that way you can use those ships this round, and because there's not really going to be many turns left, there may be 1 left, so you're going to have to move them out, and then move them again to probably take anything. I guess you could take the planet right in front of the home system next round, if there is one. I am a little shy being able to build my flagship and getting a command counter from leadership, which I'd really prefer to have 2 of those. So I offer up pretty much anything I can to Hakan, except for the things that I absolutely need in order to win, which is flank speed to give me that extra move, shields holding to make sure I win the combat, and one morale boost, which is helpful. I'll offer him up the other one, and honestly, if he asked for for another morale boost, I'd probably be like, "Hey, look, here's another one. You want this one too?" And then I keep the sabotage just to protect myself against any unfortunate events. And it is fruitful. I do get some trade goods from this. Soul ends up playing an action card which readies each cultural planet he owns. This is an obvious stall because I'm pretty sure he doesn't even own any cultural planets. So he's just trying to not pass right now in case someone tries to go after his home system or maybe does something which prevents him from getting one of his objectives. I do feel really dirty about doing this because I just sold action cards to Hakan and now I'm using my faction tech Imagine Implants to steal one back. I'm really surprised he didn't play Public Disgrace last round in order to prevent Imperial from being taken. I'm really looking through these action cards and I'm not seeing anything that stands out as super useful. Flank speed would be nice to have a backup. Even though I just sold him flank speed, it's horrible. There's a lot of stalls in here, which would be really good. And I'd really like to have, especially because if someone passes before me, they can't play their action cards during the combat that we have. And that's just due to my other faction technology, which I haven't actually used it yet. Signal jamming is pretty good because it serves as a stall, and it also potentially lets me lock down a fleet from running away from my flagship. So I end up going with signal jamming. Yin activates their home system just to build there, really. Hakan having another go at Mechatol Rex, coming in with 2 dreadnoughts and 4 infantry against the defending 3. I think based on the previous issues in this game, that's still kind of dicey. I mean, the bombardment should really kill at least one of them, and then it would be 4 infantry on 2, which should win. But infantry combat, who knows? For bombardment with their dreadnoughts, they end up getting 1 hit, which is acceptable. I mean, they have 2 there. For the first round of infantry combat, we get 0 hits from Hakan. And from the Peace Turtles, we get 1 hit. So it's not looking good so far for Hakan. Moving on to round 2 of infantry combat, we do get a hit from the Hakan player. They do get to reciprocate with the 2 infantry, and there you go. They get 1 hit from the Peace Turtles. This should make it 2-on-1 for the infantry combat in favor of Hakan. Oh, and there we go. That's the last hit that Hakan needs to take the planet. Oh, except I'm wrong. Oh, so Peace Turtles missed, but I miscounted the infantry. There's only 1 infantry left from Hakan, and the Turtles are playing Fire Team to try to re-roll that last hit. And if they succeed in this, Hakan's not going to take it again, even though he has infantry too. They do end up missing here, thankfully. And I'm actually on Hakan's side here because I feel so much sympathy for him. Like, you've gone in twice with Mechatol Rex. You haven't gone in with great odds, but with bombardment, you haven't done great on those rolls. Like, you kind of deserve to be able to take Mechatol Rex at this point. Soul activates their home system and just pulls back a lot of their infantry into it in order to defend it really well, just to make sure no one comes in, nabs it, and prevents them from scoring at the end of the round. Leadership ends up getting played here, and you guys know the drill by now. It takes me horribly long to do this, so I'm going to fast forward it a little bit. One thing to note is, strategically speaking, whenever you're spending resources, always spend your most exposed planets first. That way, if you lose them, you've already used them, and you're not going to lose those resources for the round. And that's what I do here, is I go ahead and I try to figure out, well, what are my most vulnerable planets? And let me hold on to those trade goods, because generally speaking, no one's going to take those from you. Look at you, Mintak. I do end up with just 1 token from this, which isn't ideal, but it's all I can get while also being able to afford my flagship. The Peace Turtles activate their home system and start becoming the not-so-peaceful Turtles. They build a massive armada there. The final count ends up being 3 dreadnoughts, 2 infantry, and 2 fighters. I go ahead and play construction. This is partially as a stall for me to hope other players pass, but also because obviously I need some PDSs in order to get my secret objective. The safest place I can think to put those PDSs is just both in my home system. And the other place I have PDSs at is Abyss Freya, which is pretty well defended, with the fleet at least. Yin ends up playing Plague on the home system for Soul. He messaged me earlier being like, hey, attack home system of Soul. So I think he's trying to encourage me to do so a little bit. And it's the largest stack of infantry on the board. There ends up being 8 rolls here, but only 2 of them succeed. And he only loses 2 infantry, which all in all is pretty good, I think. For Soul, at least. Hakan ends up using Reactor Meltdown against the Turtles. I really can't think of any strategic reason as to why. Oh, yeah. You'd want to get rid of the space dock that's right next to Mechatol Rex if you want to hold on to it. That would be useful. I don't think it's going to matter in this game because I don't think it's going to last much longer. With a 14-point game, I'm really curious how that changes the dynamic because you have this build up in a 10-point game, and then it feels like to me it finishes before it really reaches what could be. I'm curious what your guys' interpretation of a 14-point game is versus a 10-point game. I haven't personally had a chance to play a 14-point game. No one's insane enough to try that with me yet. Soul ends up passing, and I think this is a matter of necessity. He really only has 6 tokens left in order to get that stage 2, and I think he just ran out of stalls. Mentat coming in and slowly eating back some of Soul's slice. It shouldn't really be too impactful because he's already spent them, and he's already got the Erecta Monument anyhow, so it should be fine for Soul. The Peace Turtles go ahead and pass here. They're kind of my other target in order to get Unveil Flagship. Unfortunately, with their instinct training, they're going to be able to just stop me from being able to play flank speed. So I'll waste my ability to get to them. Almost certainly. They have the strategy token to do it. I don't know why they would just let me attack them. So my only hope here is to attack Yen. And I'd really like to wait until they pass so they can't play any action cards to stop me. And they obviously I have to wait until Warfare is used in order for me to just create my flagship. So I just need to stall by discarding action cards. At first, I lean towards morale boost, but I end up going with forward supply base. I don't think anyone's going to attack me to get any benefit from that. The morale boost, I may be able to get some benefit from when I go and attack. Oh, good. So Yin plays Warfare, which gives me an opportunity to secondary that. I end up having enough resources to build my flagship along with 2 fighters, which is pretty good, I think. The Hakan player goes ahead and passes, and I just finish up by dropping some plastic on the board. I think this leaves me with a pretty good chance in that fight because I can get 2 carriers there, tons of fighters, and then my flagship itself. So I'm feeling pretty good about winning against just the 1 carrier, destroyer, and 2 fighters. Mentak passes, and I honestly just get nervous that Yen is going to move the units away, and I'm not going to be able to get a Veiled Flagship. So I go ahead and activate that system. I throw down my flank speed. It's also worth noting that earlier Green messaged me and was like, hey, you need to go and stop Yen from having that industrial planet because he can get 4 planets of the same trait. And if you stop him from getting that, it'll prevent him from winning. So I have Green in my corner going, yeah, you should definitely go do this, helping me convince the Turtles not to use instinct training on my flank speed. So as I take a look at this, I realize I can bring my flagship, I can bring a dreadnought, I can also bring an infantry to keep up the pretense that I'm going to take that 1 planet and hopefully keep some allies on my side. I also bring along some fighters, but instead of bringing all the carriers with fighters, I decide to bring a couple of cruisers instead. I think I'm pretty assured to win this just with a flagship, a couple of fighters, and a couple of cruisers. Keeping those carriers behind is probably a mistake. They don't really do anything for me there. They really just make me feel like my home system's protected a little more than it is. Just moving on over to the Combat Bowl, which it's fantastic. If you guys haven't used this, it's amazing. You basically just move everything into that bowl, click a couple buttons, and it does all the rolls for you. It even takes into account unit upgrades or action cards that you have played in your area. It really spoils me. It kind of makes me want to play this only on Tabletop Simulator. He does do anti-fighter barrage, but he doesn't get any hits, which makes sense. He doesn't have upgraded destroyers. As a side note, upgraded destroyers are actually really beastly against fighters. For the first round of combat, I go ahead and hit that space combat button. It rolls everything for me, and I end up getting 3 hits, which is, I think, about average. It's okay. Zooming in a little more on the combat so you guys can see a little better, I hope. He ends up doing his reciprocal roll for round 1, but he doesn't get any hits, which makes sense. Everything he's rolling with requires a 9 or higher to hit. I do forget to use my morale boost. I'm not entirely sure if it would have mattered for the last roll. Overall, it's doing okay. He does go ahead and blow up his destroyer in order to produce a hit with Yin's special ability. I am kind of concerned that he's going to take this hit and assign it to my flagship and then follow it up with a direct hit to destroy my flagship, or maybe someone will. So I go ahead and do Shield's Holding to cancel that, and that finishes up the combat. I win. I also get Unveil Flagship for winning that combat, which is great. That puts me at 7 points, and it should get me the game because I'll be able to score before Yin and I'll be able to score before Soul. I'm surprised neither of them have really caught on to this, and there's not any table talk around Yassaro's going to win. Let's do something to stop them. With the exception being of Hakan, who whispers me and just is like, congratulations. And I play dumb, like, oh, I don't know what you're talking about. Yin moves in and takes a planet. They win the bombardment roll, and they score make an example of them, which is just destroy the last ground troop through bombardment. There really isn't a point for me to do this other than to stall out in case the Yin player has something up their sleeve that I wanted to respond to or defend myself against. So I just play signal jamming in order to get the Yin player to drop one of their tokens on the system here. All the other players have passed at this point, so I'm really just waiting for him to pass before I pass. Goes back to the Yin player's turn, and he ends up passing, and I feel comfortable passing at this point as well. Moving on to scoring, we do this in initiative order just because this is going to matter. Mentak scores 1 point from spinning 5 trade goods, putting them at a total of 6 points. From talking to the peace turtles, it looks like they can't really score anything, so that leaves it to me, which is I'm going to score Galvanize the People, spend 6 of my command counters from Tactics and Strategy, and I'm also going to score Establish a Perimeter, which is have 4 PDSs on the board, bringing me up to 9 and subsequently 10, which gets me the game. Had I not been able to score that, it would have went to Yin, who would have been able to get 2 points from Galvanize the People. If Yin didn't get it, then it would have went to Soul, who scored last. He would have had 2 points from Galvanize the People, and then he would have gotten a secret objective. And that's how I find most tabletop simulators games go, is it really comes down to initiative order in the last round, or who can get Imperial to score mid-round. Thank you all for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you're interested in future content, or if you just want to see more videos like this. In addition, leave a like. That helps me know what videos to focus on. I really hope you enjoy the video. If not, let me know in the comments. I'd appreciate any feedback you'd like to provide. Otherwise, have a good day.